Thomas and the Magic Railroad was the first live-action Thomas and Friends movie released on the 14th of July 2000 in the UK. This movie is the Marmite of the Thomas franchise. Some people love it, and some people hate it. There have been several reviews about this movie, but in my opinion, none of which have had the detail or scope as a video which could have been made by, say, the Unlucky Tug. While at the time of this recording, he's not touching the movie with a 100-foot barge pole, I've decided to take a crack at reviewing it. As a thank you to all my fellow steamers for helping my little channel that could get over the hallowed 1,000 subscribers mark. This movie is so polarising amongst the fans that I decided to make this into an extended review video, broadcast in two parts. Part 1, my personal backstory with the film. Part 2, the review itself. This way, if you want to just jump right into the review, you can. But if you want to know my reasons behind my thoughts, you can watch the first part for more context about my own journey with the movie. It's always better to give too much than too little. So let's dive in with part 1, my personal journey with Thomas and the Magic Railroad. First of all, like any story, it's important for me to set the scene. Back in the year 2000, most UK households at the time either didn't have the internet, or if they did, it was dial-up, which meant it would take upwards of 20 minutes to load a web page and you would get kicked off if your parents needed to make a landline phone call. I grew up in a working class family, which I am extremely proud of, so we never had luxuries like internet, cable, or satellite TV, because we couldn't afford them. At this point in time, shows like Thomas and Friends were moving over to satellite channels like Nick Jr., which made keeping up to date with the series very hard to do. We had what's called in the UK terrestrial TV, which only had 5 channels, and they were not the most consistent when it came to scheduling. I'm still angry at CITV because they never showed the rest of the show Reboot. I know this might seem like a tangent, but remember these points going forward, as they do tie in with the overall narrative. I saw Thomas and the Magic Railroad when it first came out in the year 2000. I was 13 years old, and at the time I'd left a lot of my Thomas roots behind due to societal pressures and the aforementioned scheduling issues. But Thomas was a massive part of my childhood, so I still wanted to go see it on the big screen. However, at the time it was released, I didn't know anything about one integral part of the movie, Shining Time Station. I know about it now, but 2000s me had no clue about Shining Time or Mr. Conductor. So seeing Thomas and the Magic Railroad as a 13-year-old boy who only knew series 1 to 4 of the UK version of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, afterwards I had a lot of questions. Why is Sodor in another universe? What is Shining Time Station? Why are there humans in this? Why is Mr. Conductor tiny in our world? When could we get to Sodor using gold dust? When did the show start using magic? Needless to say, 13-year-old me was quite emotional about this movie, and not in a positive way. I would say to my parents, this isn't my Thomas. Why did they do this to my Thomas? This was because this TV series made me believe the island of Sodor was a real place. The stories were based on real events, the team behind the series strived for realism in every episode up to that point, and it never pandered to its audience because the stories had real life consequences. I knew it was a show about talking engines and characters like Sir Topham Hatt were models, but in the TV series, it created a world where that didn't matter to me because everything else was so true to life. So when the movie came out and introduced this other world angle and magic gold dust, the illusion was finally broken. It's like when you're a child and, spoiler alert, you find out that Santa isn't real. At first you don't believe it could be true, and then you think it might be true, but you keep trying to live in denial, and then something happens. This could be finding the presents in your parents' bedroom, or sneaking out of your room on Christmas Eve to go to the toilet and discovering your parents taking the presents down the stairs. Either way, it's that one event that makes you accept the reality placed before you. For me, ironically, it was the use of magic that did it. Now that I'm older and I've re-embraced my love of Thomas, I was able to finally see episodes of Shining Time, as well as find out all the behind the scenes stories regarding Thomas and the Magic Railroad and its production history. In all honesty, the fact we even got this movie at all is nothing short of remarkable. It's one of those projects that could have wound up in development hell due to changes in the distributor, filming in Canada and not the UK, having to transport that entire set over to Canada, and the constant script alterations. I also know that the plan was to use this movie as a launchpad to get Shining Time back on the air, and with the digital age underway at that point in time, new audiences across the world would have finally been exposed to Shining Time. But just as Thomas and Friends needed American audiences to take the series to new heights, Shining Time needed international audiences to respond positively to it when they took Thomas to the big screen. Unfortunately, people like myself didn't know Shining Time in the year 2000, and that was, in my opinion, what took this particular train off the rails. It's important for me to tell you my story because every Thomas fan has their own personal experience, not just with Thomas but with this movie. First as kids and then as adults. As we grow older, our opinions change, and Thomas and the Magic Railroad is no different. We watch interviews and documentaries about it, get leaks of behind the scenes footage, find original versions of movie scripts, and become more aware of the backstage politics that went on throughout the production. So when I rewatched Thomas and the Magic Railroad in July 2022, as a 35-year-old man with a family of his own, I had a whole new perspective on the movie. I appreciated the trials and the tribulations the crew had to go through to even get this movie made. I understand why certain choices had to be made to get what was clearly a labour of love from those involved onto the big screen. I feel responsible for the Thomas series that we know now coming into being, because I was one of those teenagers that slated the movie on its initial release, and if I hadn't done so, maybe the original team would have had a better chance of continuing the series in the classic style we knew and loved. I still believe we would be where we are now with the franchise, but it might have delayed the inevitable and kept it in the hands of those who truly cared about Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends for a little while longer. I say this to you because I want you to understand my love for Thomas and Friends. I have so much respect for everyone who made the series in all its forms. A show that was released in 1984 still stands the test of time decades later. A production team broke new ground in children's entertainment that hadn't been seen before and, quite frankly, hasn't been seen since. In the modern world, your opinion must always be right on the first attempt, because with social media, it's on the record. But opinions change over time. Just because you felt a certain way about a movie as a teenager doesn't mean you still feel that way as an adult. If I made a review of Thomas and the Magic Railroad on this channel as my 13-year-old self, it would be a completely different review to the one I'm about to make. It would have been matter of fact, no sympathy for directors or actors who spent years working on this, and no balanced or rational explanations to my opinions. 13-year-old me would have just said, "This film's bad. That's my opinion. You're wrong. I'm right." I think we can all agree that's the kind of review that would provoke a lot of negative backlash and is definitely not befitting of the fandom we're a part of. So I'm going to do my review of Thomas and the Magic Railroad in the most constructive way as I can. I don't want to devalue the experience I had watching this movie as a teenager, but still embrace the maturity that I've gained throughout the decades since its release, as well as respect the legacy of those that created a movie which, good or bad, has had a massive impact on our little fan community. Thank you for watching part 1. Stay tuned for my review in part 2.